Hi, and welcome to this chat on why dogs can end up hating their harnesses. And to be honest, it would apply the same to coats or even leads as well. And what's important really is what you can do about it. So let's go through a few of the different issues. Um, Firstly, to check with a harness is it a good fit? Is it physically comfortable for your dog? It may seem obvious, but if you aren't sure, maybe take them with perfect fit. There are people in the community who'll come and check the fit. You can bring it to me, let me have a check. Check it's not rubbing under the arms, that it's not sitting too high on the throat or compressing the shoulders. So that is the first thing to check, absolutely. Now, the other primary thing is for all of you with puppies less than 16 weeks, you really have to get your puppies socialized to the experience of wearing a harness, wearing a coat, all of the things that will form part of their adult life. I know it's tempting to wait because if you buy something when you've got a tiny puppy, they've grown out of it almost 2 weeks later. But the point is, if they don't have that experience and feel good and comfortable about it before they're 16 weeks, it's really hard to introduce later on. In terms of coats, you may think, oh, I'm never going to put my dog in a coat. But for a lot of the larger breeds, bull breeds, it isn't, in fact, a waterproof coat that you might want to look at wearing in the future. It would be a cool coat in the summer, but the principles are the same. The dog has to be comfortable with the sit of the fabric on their shoulders, and then also the attachment strap around their belly, if not around their legs as well. So there is a lot there to get used to. Probably most often what I come across is a dog who is fearful or anxious on their walk, and they have associated the fear and anxiety of the walk with the harness. So you pick the harness up and they run and hide. If your dog is fearful or anxious on the walk, that is your primary issue and you need to deal with that first. And I would just thoroughly recommend you get in touch because if they have back associated the fear of the walk to the harness, it is a reasonably significant issue and we should get on it for the welfare of the dog. The other issue that may add to their fear, anxiety of the harness is if you haven't trained loose lead walking, because anything that is pulling and pushing them around is likely to be viewed as a bit of an aversive and they may not like it. Why would they? So if you think that is part of your issue, then just get enrolled in a workshop, do some group classes, and see if you can't get your dog walking really calmly to your side with you and not lunging around on the lead. So they're your primary issues that might have caused an issue in terms of the dog's relationship with their harness or coat or lead, etc. What can you do? So the first thing is when you're choosing a harness, I would actually encourage you to get 4 or 5 different harnesses and try them on in the comfort of your own home and have a little walk around the living room on the lead and just check how the dog feels about it, but also whether it was nice to put it on, take it off, and how the dog moves. Far too often, you spend ages choosing a harness, you come away with one. When you're at home, you're like, oh, it doesn't really work, but we spent ages choosing that, so we better stick with it. So I've got a separate chat. It was actually last week's one on collars and harnesses. So I don't want to repeat that, but you need to choose a well-fitted harness that doesn't rub. Look at makes like Perfect Fit, True Love, Rough Wear, and I'm sure there are plenty of other really good makes out there. The next thing you need to do is to retrain the dog's association with the harness. So for a period when you're working on their displeasure at the harness, it's really important you aren't routinely chasing them around the house and heavy-handedly putting them in the harness against their will. What you want is to have a period, perhaps 4 weeks, when if your dog is safe enough on a collar, you walk on a collar, but if they're pulling, then perhaps what you do is leave them in their current harness while they're walking and retrain them to have a new association with the new harness. it is going to take some time, and I would suggest as a minimum 4 weeks, and if the dog's really phobic, potentially longer. And all that being said, if you've got an issue with fear on walks, none of this is going to work, so deal with that first. So provided you've just got a pulling on the lead issue or another reason for the distaste of the harness, set aside 4 weeks when you don't walk them on their new harness, and you'd spend some time to start with asking them to touch the harness, giving them a treat, putting the harness on the floor, getting them to eat treats off the harness. So phase 1, build a positive association with that harness, and don't associate it with going out on walks. Excuse me. The next thing you need to do is work on desensitizing them to the scary bits of wearing a harness. Quite often, if it's a head-in harness, you will have an issue with the dog actually pushing the harness up over their ears, and you might have an issue with the harness getting clipped up. If it's a significant fear of a harness, you may need some help with that, but I would encourage you, if it's a head-in harness, to spend at least a week, once you've let them eat treats off it and ask them to touch it, your second week, hold the harness up and feed them treats through the head hole if it's a head-in harness. If it's a step-in harness, ideally what you'll do is train your dog in the second week to step each paw into the loop so that you can then lift that up. You might also want to work on that second week at getting them to maintain a stand stay, even if there's not a harness involved, or a sit stay if that would work for your particular dog. The clipping sound that a harness makes when it does it, when you do it up, can be something that scares your dog, and it sounds like, how could that be scary? You know, it's such a small thing, and yet you can just check that. Don't put the harness on the dog, say the word clip it up and give them a treat, and I bet you about half the dogs that you do that with will have a little startle when they hear the clip, and that's when it's not on them. So get them used to it when it's not on them, so that the sound of that clip predicts a treat coming. So you're already at week 3 of your harness introduction. So the next stage is when you've desensitized the scary bits separately. The earliest that would be is week 3. You might just do the harness up, feed them a few treats and take it off. And you're gradually going to add duration to the time that they're happy to wear the harness. Once you've got that up over, say, 30 seconds, what you would do is have a play with a toy when they're in their harness, walk around the house when they're in the harness, do some super fun things, move it on from just eating treats. Eating treats is great, but games where you are interacting with your dog are even better. And what you're really doing is getting them used to how the harness moves on their body as they move. And build up really slowly, 20% in terms of the wearing time per day during that 3rd week. Once you get to your 4th week, you'd be looking at taking them out for short walks on it. But I would stick to these short walks where you have loads of treats and you're doing lots of focused work with your dog. And as you move through that 4th week of introducing and retraining the harness, you would gradually move towards keeping the harness on for the duration of a longer walk. So questions I'm sometimes asked is, isn't it just easier to wrestle the dog into the harness once a day and leave them in it all day, and then they'll get somehow desensitized to it? Really what we're saying is habituated to it during the day. And actually, I'm not in favor of that, because it can be uncomfortable. It's like back in the day when you got a new pair of school shoes and you had to wear them. You remember you wear them for an hour or 2 in the house each day first before you wore them to school. So if your dog doesn't like a harness, forcing them to wear it during the day seems downright cruel. But also, it doesn't actually solve the problem that you probably did have to wrestle them into it, and that is never going to set this up for success. So I would encourage you to steer away from that approach, and just to bear in mind that you will achieve more in the longer term if you can be really patient and go really slowly in the short term. And generally what I find happens is people are really patient, they eat treats off it, they touch it, they give the dog a few treats, and then they're like, oh, we're done, and they shove it on and go out for a walk. and the dog stands like a statue and refuses to walk, and you just force them through it. So try and allow at least 4 weeks, and try and bear in mind that you as a human are going to find about week 3 the hardest to be patient with your dog, but it is thoroughly worthwhile. The other thing which I've already mentioned that you could do is simply work on training a really robust loose lead walking behavior, so that the dog doesn't have all of those sensations of being pulled and pushed around on the lead. If you have any questions or comments on why your dog hates their harness and what you in particular might need to do, then please feel free to leave a note in the comments, and I will reply to you there. Thanks for watching. Bye.